What's going on, everybody? This is the Dirt Bike Channel podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Brotherson, and this podcast is brought to you by me, and it's probably brought to you by you clicking on the links for Rocky Mountain ATV. So I'm an affiliate with Rocky Mountain ATV, and the best way to support this podcast and Dirt Bike Channel in general is to use my links. So if you go to my website, dirtbikechannel.com, and click on the links for, there's a link there that says Shop Rocky Mountain ATV. Click on that. It doesn't cost you a dime. And you get to order just as normal. After that, after you click on the link, you just order anything as normal. And that helps to support Dirt Bike Channel. So it's a super fun way to support what we're doing here and get yourself gear and tools and anything else that you need for your dirt bike. They cannot be beat. There's free shipping on orders over $75. And yeah, so go ahead and click on my link for Rocky Mountain ATV when you're at my website, dirtbikechannel.com. Thanks, guys. Let's jump right into this. Let's talk about the Stark Varg. So it's been a minute since I did a podcast, and I did do a video on this a couple weeks ago on YouTube, and I titled the name of I titled a video "Killing My Channel and Business" or "Killing My Channel and Business." It's the Stark Varg full review, and I on the thumbnail I said that it's my biggest mistake, and it's interesting to say that because I've been at this for a long time, and I've had a lot of different dirt bikes, and I've done a lot of different things, and some of them have been more fun to ride than others, and some of them have been a better fit for me than others. This is a full-on motocross bike, and as you guys know, I don't ride a ton of moto. I've been riding more moto the last couple of years because my sons have been into it. Specifically, my older son has been into motocross, and so we've been going to tracks and doing motocross, and I really do enjoy it. I'm not good at it at all, but I enjoy it. Consequently, both my sons are faster than me on the track. We were at the track just a couple weeks ago with both of my sons, and my younger son is still on a KTM 85 SX, and he's hardly ridden at all this year because he had 2 broken wrists earlier in the year. He plays a lot more basketball than he does ride dirt bikes. But anyway, he got on the bike and we went to a track, and he hadn't been to a track in like a year, and he was faster than me on the track. Just these kids are good. And they just, on corners, they just pull me. And then there's this one jump on the track. It's like this big step up jump that I don't really do. I kind of hit it 3/4, but both my sons will just sky off of it, and they pull me so far on that section of the track. Anyway, the point is, I'm not a good track rider, and this Stark Varg is a track bike. Like, that's what they designed the Stark. It's an electric bike. It has 80 horsepower, as many of you know, or it can have as much as 80 horsepower. You can program it down to 10 horsepower, clear up to 80 in 1 horsepower increments. It's pretty incredible that way. But it is a motocross bike, and I don't really do motocross. Most of what I've done is single track in the mountains, and then hard enduro or soft enduro, desert riding, that type of stuff. Trail riding. That's what I've done. That's what I built my channel on. So it doesn't necessarily surprise that a lot of people that watch my channel aren't really motocross people and they don't really care. But it isn't the first time that I've had a full-on motocross bike on the channel. Like, I've had several different full-on moto bikes. Some of the time we've been trying to repurpose them for off-road. Other times, like, I gave away a KTM 250 SXF just a few years ago. And there was still a lot of interest in that bike. With the Stark Varg, there just was no interest in it. Once it hit my channel, there was a little bit of interest when I unboxed it. And I had so many people, like when Stark first announced that they were building this bike, there was a lot of hype around it. This 2 or 3 years back. And there were so many people begging me, like, hey, you're going to order one, or you're going to buy one, or you're going to buy one. You need to review this. You need to review this. And I didn't initially think I should review it, but I had so many people reaching out to me saying, like, oh man, we want to hear what you have to say about this, that then I did pre-order a bike. Now, it took like 2 years to get it, and I never even got the bike that I pre-ordered. Like, I could have, but they wanted me to pay full price for the bike. Like, there was just some weird stuff that was happening at the end there. They wanted me to pay full price for a bike that wasn't even assembled yet, and it was still in Europe. And then it would get assembled if I paid full price. It was just kind of weird the way all that went down. But I ended up essentially taking a bike off of somebody else and essentially just taking their purchase. I went to the dealer with this guy who had reached out to me after seeing one of my videos. He didn't want the bike, and so I just took it from him. And it was interesting because there was a little bit of interest when I did the initial kind of like unboxing, unveiling of the bike. But after that, the interest completely dropped off. And then I offered it as a sweepstakes bike. And I have just been trying to make these sweepstakes viable. And one of the things I wanted to do was mostly focus on my affiliate links through Rocky Mountain ATV to get it done. And also sell off a few things that I still had on my website. But the uptake was so low for this bike. It was incredibly low. So then I decided, well, I probably should put a t-shirt on my website. I did like a 60-day sweepstakes for it, which I hadn't done for a minute. And I also decided I wasn't going to spend a lot of money in marketing on like Facebook and Instagram. But I was like, well, I can still send emails on this thing, and I can still, send text messages and let people know that it's happening. And although there were a lot of different things that I was doing with this sweepstakes, one thing was for sure, it was like people just didn't give a crap about it. They didn't give a crap. And by the end, it was within 1 day of the thing closing, and I hadn't even covered costs on the sweepstakes. I was like, holy crap. And on the last day of the sweepstakes, it's hard to say because I still don't have all the invoices from the warehouse, but I know I didn't make anything. Like the only way to have these sweepstakes be viable is that they need to make money. That one, it didn't make money. I might have covered my cost on it. It's hard to say because I have actually been on vacation. Ever since the sweepstakes ended, I went to Lake Powell with my kids. And so I've just been in Lake Powell mode. And so I don't know, like it was just sucking so much on my business, and it was not at a good time. So I do want to do another sweepstakes in the future, but the Stark just was not good. I will not order another one of those bikes. I wouldn't offer it as a sweepstakes bike. If I did, it would have to be like a consolation prize or something. And it would be if they had like an enduro version of it with a clutch or something. Because it just drained the life out of my business, and it's still sitting in my, I'm waiting for the sweepstakes administrators to give me the 10 names of the finalists, and then we'll go live on YouTube and do a drawing. But like I would send a text message out and be like, hey guys, there's 3 days left, or there's a day left. Go to my website, buy something, or go to Rocky Mountain ATV and use the link or whatever. And it was just like no one cared. Like the amount of uptake that there was atrociously low. So you guys have spoken, and I get it. Electric is not for everybody. Okay, let's talk about the things that are good on the bike, like really, really great on the bike. If you stop and think about it, let's just say that this is a pretty massive achievement because this is the first bike that they've ever produced. And when you take it to the track, like the motocross track, it is phenomenal. And you have to give them credit because that's what they were setting out to do, was make a motocross bike and make it feel good and make it competitive with all these other bikes out there. And if you were able to do that, if you're able to take a concept and bring it to bear, and the very first model that you produce is incredible on a motocross track, I mean, let's just say that was a pretty intense feat, and they did that. It's really, really good on a motocross track. It's really, really good out in the desert when the speeds are higher. It's super good out there. It's easy to ride. I love how smooth the power is, and you get to dial in exactly how much power you want and how much braking you want. I did notice, like when I was out in the single track and stuff, I had the braking regeneration on about 80%. The more I rode it on the track, the more I was like, that's too much on the track. It felt like it was slowing down too much. I don't love that amount of it. That's essentially engine braking. And at 80%, I think it's too much personally for the light. I'm more of a two-stroke guy, and I'd rather not have so much engine braking. And I think it's a little better to dial it back for me personally on the track, dial back that engine braking. But as far as like the amount of power that I would typically ride it with on the track, it was somewhere between 40 and 45, which is kind of in the 252 stroke or the 254 stroke power range. And the sucker will just go for miles. You're never in the wrong gear. And it's just incredibly easy to ride on the track because of that electric power that you get to dial in exactly what you want. It's a game changer to be able to just specify, anywhere in whatever riding conditions that you're at. Like I did, I took it in some nastier single track, and I dialed the power clear back to like at one point it might be 25 horsepower, because I was just trying to like get forward momentum and not spin the wheel. And then on the track, you could dial in by 1 horsepower increments and things like that, and just like help yourself maybe to get over a jump or whatever. I did notice that, there were times that having no transmission were kind of hampering me or hindering me on a track, because I don't know jumps that well. I don't know exactly what speed to go, and sometimes it's nice to just be able to have a gauge for yourself to be like, yeah, this is my second gear jump, and I hit this, mid throttle in second gear. You just kind of get to know about what your motor sounds like when you're in second gear or third gear or whatever it is, and just hit jumps like that. And it's a good gauge when you have a transmission, like on a regular gas dirt bike. You don't have that on the Varg. So it would probably be better for people who have a little bit more experience on the track. Where I'm a newbie, sometimes I'm like, it's hard to gauge the speed exactly with an electric bike, I've found. And so it's really good on the track, but it's probably a little bit better for people who have already been riding motocross quite a bit, and they just have a better understanding of how fast they need to hit certain jumps. Another thing that I thought was absolutely incredible about the bike was high-speed hill climbs. It is amazing at that. Not as much great at the slower speeds, which I'll get to later, but if you're just going out and you've got like some big hill climbs or whatever, you guys, if you live in a place where you have some elevation and stuff, a lot of guys have done some hill climbing, and this bike is absolutely amazing for that. If your speeds stay higher, and you can keep the speed up, it is incredible what that bike will climb. And part of that is because you can hear the traction. Like you can hear if you're starting to lose traction on a hill climb, and you don't have to, like, if you're on a gas bike on hill climbs, you're just like, a lot of times you're just like wide open, because you don't want the bike to bog on a high-speed hill climb with a like a gas bike. And so you're just like, wah! You're just like either wide open or 3/4 throttle on another bike. And a lot of times what that means is you're just like putting so much power to the ground, you're breaking traction. And if you're breaking traction, you're kind of wasting that energy, and your tire isn't as efficient when it's just grabbing and ripping everything out of its way. It's better to actually maintain traction. And so on this bike, you can hear that. You can hear the rear wheel on an electric bike in a way that you cannot hear the rear tire on a gas bike. The gas bikes, you've got all that engine noise and then the exhaust noise, and it drowns out the rear tire. But when you're on an electric bike, you can still hear, there's motor whine and there's chain noise and all that stuff. So they're not silent by any means, but it's quiet enough that you get to hear a different side of the motorcycle, which is that rear tire. You can hear when it's breaking traction. You can hear when it's flexing over rocks and roots and things like that. So on a hill climb, if the speeds are higher, I keep saying higher speeds because in low speed, I don't like it. It's hard for me to get traction in low speed. I'll get to that. But like on just a standard, like massive, gnarly hill climb, you get to hear when the tire is about to break traction. So you either shift your weight back or you roll off the throttle just a little bit. And it doesn't matter to roll off the throttle, because as soon as you get back on it, you're always going to be in the meat of the power. An electric motor makes the same amount of torque. It makes all the torque at 1 RPM, whereas a gas motor doesn't make as much. Like there's a torque curve, and if you get out of the torque curve or out of the power curve, you're kind of screwed, and then you have to use the clutch to get the RPMs back up, or you have to shift down often to get back into where the meat of the power is made. The horsepower and the torque on that motor is made. On an electric bike, it's made everywhere. It's like a flat. It always has all the power, essentially. And so it's amazing for hill climbs. I absolutely loved it for that type of stuff. And then the fact that you're always in the right gear, whether you're on a motor track or on those hill climbs, that's pretty cool. That's another game changer. It does take away from some of the fun of riding motorcycles, I will not lie. the fact that you're not using a clutch and you're not shifting gears does take something away from me that I don't like. So it's a pro and con. You're always in the right power with the bike because you're never shifting the bike, but it does take some of the fun away from it. I will say that. But being always in the right gear is pretty cool too, especially for me on a moto track. I've already complained that it didn't have gears because I didn't know exactly what speed maybe to hit some of the jumps, but then again, it does just allow you to focus on a corner, focus on a rut, and just go through the thing without having to worry about the motor. Again, so pros and cons. Another thing that was pretty interesting about the bike is it is the fastest bike I've ever been on. And I will say that again, it is the fastest bike I've ever ridden. I'm not talking about top speed. It actually, of all the dirt bikes, it does have a higher top speed of all the dirt bikes I've been on. But you could change gearing on bikes, but in its stock gearing, it is wicked fast. I did a YouTube video on that. You can go check out, but it's how fast it gets there. And so let me give you a little explanation or a little example of what I'm talking about is of how fast the bike is. I've bought a lot of bikes over the years, and when I get a bike, I'll maybe run it up and down the street a little bit. A lot of times I'll do that to kind of run in the brakes because there's residue on the brake pads and the brake rotors and stuff when we get these bikes. And you have to kind of burn that off. And in the process, so I'll just kind of go out in the front, in front of the house or whatever, and just kind of drag the brakes a little bit and run it up and down the road a few times, dragging the brakes until they actually start to work good. And I usually am not doing that with a helmet, or if I get a bike for the first time, I'll warm it up and I'll just kind of mess around in front of the house. And I should be wearing a helmet, I get it, but I'm usually not pushing it at all. And anyway, I don't wear helmets when I do that. I just kind of jump on the bike and I'm in my shoes and sometimes shorts or whatever. I did that on the Stark Varg, and I first had it at 30 horsepower and then 40 horsepower. By the time I did one little acceleration hit at 50 horsepower on the bike, and it scared me so bad I went and put my helmet on. It is so bloody fast. It was like lighting up the rear tire, and if it did hook up, it was just coming right in your face. And it doesn't matter whether you're going 10 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. You hit the throttle, and the thing will just the wheel will just fly up in the air. And I was like, holy crap! I'm like, I cannot ride this bike out here without a helmet on, at all. It is so freaking fast. It is terrifyingly fast. And then I tried it I put my helmet on, tried it at 60 horsepower, and I was like, holy shnikes. This is the fastest motorcycle ever. I couldn't believe it. And I had a Tesla. I've actually sold my Tesla. I had a little Tesla Model 3. It was the performance version, so it was wicked fast. Fastest car I've ever had. I sold it a month ago. And this is how that was. It was electric cars, electric dirt bikes. They're just faster than gas. They just are. They're not as fun. You don't hear the motor. You don't have the vibrations. It doesn't hit you on all the same levels, but they are faster, straight up. And then there was that one time that I took it out to the desert. I was on a dirt road. I finally did put it to the 80 horsepower. It's terrifying. You would never, I don't know that you would ever, 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 ever want to ride the bike over 60 horsepower. Anything over 60 is just bloody insane on that bike. Insane. 50 horsepower was crazy. 60 horsepower is mind-blowing. And anything over 60 is totally impractical on that bike. Totally impractical. I don't know why you would ever run it over that. But it feels really stable at speed, especially if you're in whoops. It's really planted. It is heavy. It's 265 pounds, but you don't necessarily feel that, when you're riding it, at least not in the faster stuff. And even the range. So range is an issue on these bikes, but it did seem to get better on the bike with over-the-air updates. I don't know that that's true, but it did certainly feel like that with the over-the-air updates, which is another super big positive through that phone. You get this Android phone that has actually data on it. I don't know who's paying for that. Stark is paying for that, or you just that was baked into the cost, but like, and I don't know how long that'll last. I don't know how long you'll be getting over the air updates if you're not paying for and maybe they'll just come through Wi-Fi at some point, but I feel like they're coming over the air, and I don't know if it's through Wi-Fi or not. You do get to hook the bike to Wi-Fi, or at least that phone, but I don't think because I switched internet providers like a month and a half ago, and the bike seems to still be getting updates, even though it's not connected to my Wi-Fi, because I didn't reconnect it to my new router. So that's kind of cool. And it also, they're improving the bike. So it got an over-the-air update, which is a reverse mode and a forward crawl mode. I didn't know that it had gotten that, and then it kind of came to bite me on a hill because I had tipped the bike over on a hill on a nasty like section of single track, and then I had accidentally gotten the bike down into a reverse mode that I didn't know even existed, and I was hitting the gas, and I'm trying to go forward, and I'm going backward. I'm trying to figure out what the freak is going on. And I noticed it is actually in reverse and pulling me down the hill, which wasn't a great timing for me to find out that it had that. But that's not Stark's fault. I just wasn't paying attention to any of the updates, and I wasn't listening to what they were saying or whatever. And then, but there are certain aspects, there are certain places that I do think a reverse gear could be cool on a dirt bike. I haven't been able to actually put it in practice where it was like, oh, I need this reverse right now, but I can see it. Why not have it? Like, why not have it? And it has a forward crawl mode as well, which is cool. So it'll be interesting to see what other updates that they provide through, the next few months or the next couple of years on over-the-air updates. The brakes are great. They went with Brembo brakes. My bike had a front rear brake, like a hand brake on the left-hand side because the guy that I bought it from ordered it with that. I ordered mine with the rear foot brake, the bike I never did actually take possession of. And so then I bought the whole rear brake thing. It was kind of expensive. It was like $300 and some, but I did put the rear brake on it. And they went with Brembo brakes, and they're great. As far as the forks were great too. Were they KYB forks? I think. And the valving was really good for faster desert, and it was good for motocross. It wasn't good for single track, but I'm not going to bash it for that because they didn't make it as a single track bike. They were making it as a motocross bike. And oftentimes motocross bikes work really well out in the desert as the speeds are higher. So that was something that was pretty cool. And so that kind of wraps up most of the things I wanted to say about what I thought they did really, really well with the bike. So what were some of the things that I didn't love about the bike? Number one, it feels heavy, and at 265 pounds, it's only, 15 or 20 pounds heavier than some of the other bikes that I've had. But man, you feel that heaviness when you're lifting the bike up. So when you tuck the wheel in a corner, like on a motocross track, and then you go to lift it up, it feels like a freaking pig. It feels so bloody heavy. And I think that's because of where the weight is on the bike. I think more of the weight is up higher than what we're used to on dirt bikes. And also, when I'm lifting it on and off the stand, I usually stand behind the bike and just grab the rear wheel, and I'm kind of using the fender as like a stabilizer up on the top. So I have one hand down on the rear wheel, and I kind of do a little bit of a squat. And then I stand up with it and then shimmy over and put it onto a stand. That's how I lift most of the bikes, just to be safe, like saving my back and all those things. And this bike feels bloody heavy when you're doing that. Like, it is just, you wouldn't think it would be that heavy, but it does feel really heavy. The other thing that I noticed is when I was doing like single track and when I was doing loose, slow climbs, it got the worst traction I've ever had on any dirt bike. It was not great in the tight single track. And, you could say, well, they didn't design it for that. And that's true. But it was the worst performing motorcycle that I've ever had when I got into tight technical single track. It just wasn't good there. I don't want to hamper on it too much because it is a full-on motocross bike, and it was motocross valving and all those things, but I expected more out of it because of how good it did the hill climbs, like the faster stuff, like the amount of traction that I felt like I could keep when the speeds were higher. I was pretty dang surprised about how crappy the traction was in the slow stuff, So that's something just to kind of take note of. Now, most of the people that buy these bikes are not going to be doing slow single track, so they won't have a problem with that. Another thing that really sucked is the power gets drained incredibly fast at the beginning of a day at the track. So most of the time I rode the bike, to be honest, was at tracks. I took it to tracks like four different times. 2 different tracks, and I just it sucked the power so bloody fast at the beginning of the days. Like when the track is, prepped and it's cut deep and everything, I couldn't believe how much power it took. It would take I did it 2 or 3 different times where I got out early on the track, and it would take 30% of my battery power in 10 minutes of riding. Like, it was insane. In 2 or 3 laps, 30% of my battery. And I talked to some other Stark Varg owners, and they expressed the same thing. They're like, it's almost better just if you get to the track and you get there early, it's almost better to wait for 45 minutes or so until lines get cut into the track, and then you can follow more of those lines, because when you're making the lines, it just drains the battery like you cannot believe. And if you had to do, if the track was deep and let's say it was a really, really sandy track, you would have to take your generator to the track in order to use this bike, because you would blow through the power. So you would need to have the bike on the generator anytime you weren't riding it, if you were a fast rider and pushing hard at a sandy track. That's just the reality of it. Now, for me, there were 2 times that the bike ran out of power. It was out of power before I was ready to be done. And especially if you have anybody else ride the bike. Like, if you go to the track and there was one time my son rode the bike for a little bit, and he's faster than me. Luckily, the track was kind of already cut in, but between me riding it a little bit and then him riding it a little bit, there wasn't any more power left at the end of the day. And I didn't bring a generator, so I didn't really have a way to charge the thing back up while we're at the track, and they do charge relatively slowly. That's another thing. So the charging is kind of slow unless you have an adapter so you can charge the thing at 220 volts, which I had to buy an adapter just to be able to plug the bike into a US outlet at 110, at 110 volts. But if you had the right adapters and things to more fastly charge the bike, almost off of a dryer outlet, you have to have, in the US, you'd have to kind of have, if you had a dryer outlet in your shop or your garage and then had the right adapter for it, then you can charge the bike at more than 10 amps, which would be good if you needed to do it fast. I didn't end up doing that because by the time I get home, it doesn't matter how fast I charge the bike if it's just sitting at home. So I would charge the bike a lot of times, even slow charging at, sorry, my computer locked here. I want to get my notes back up. But I was charging the bike at a slow charge, because the faster you charge a battery, the more you kind of fatigue it or whatever. So I didn't really worry about the fast charging stuff. But if you were at the track and you were just, burning through battery, that could be a problem. So the range for single track was not great. It was okay, but not great. And it did get a little bit better, but without a clutch and without a hot swappable battery, this just really could never be really an off-road enduro bike. It's a good bike for training or whatever, but because you can't do double blips with the clutch and you can't modulate the power with your clutch hand and with no clutch, it isn't a bike that I would want long-term. And even if I'm going to do a motocross bike, I'd rather have a 254 stroke, because then I could ride it, my son could ride it, we could both go to the track, and my son and I could share a 250. It wouldn't be great for him or one of us would be too light or too heavy. But the point is, if you had a 254 stroke, 2 people could ride the bike at the track. And sometimes that might be the best thing. If my son went out and rode it, and then when he was done, I would go jump out on the track. We could actually go to the track with one bike. You could not do that with this one. You'd be out of power way too fast. Also, the kickstand is annoying. They have a little cam thing on it that makes it so if there's no weight on the kickstand, it automatically flips up. I hate those. Yes, you can disable that, but I hate them. The charging cable on the they put the charger inside of the stand, which is good because then it's kind of integrated into the stand. But the cable was way too short. If you watch my video, they just needed to add 3 or 4 more inches, maybe 5 or 6 inches on that cable so that it wasn't so hard to freaking charge the bike on that. Like most of the time, I didn't charge the bike on the stand. I would just like have it on the kickstand and then put the stand over there right next to the bike and then tip the stand on its side so I had a little bit of extra leeway on the cable, because that wasn't great. So there were several things on the bike I'm like, you guys missed and you guys whiffed. But then there were also things where I'm like, they got so many things right. And I know I've said that on a lot of my reviews, is like they did more right than they did wrong. But that is kind of how I feel about it. So I don't think I'll ever buy another one of these things. It was crazy expensive, and it was not a great business decision for my business, especially offering that as, a standalone sweepstakes bike. That did not work well. But at the same time, I'm glad that I got it just for the experience of it, but it wasn't a great business decision. And unless they put a clutch on one, I don't think I'd ever buy another one of these Starks. I want a clutch for enduro techniques, for like lifting my front wheel around, for doing double blips over logs and rocks, for doing pivot turns. I want a clutch. I don't care that it's electric and has smooth power. I want a clutch on the dang thing. And if they put a clutch on them, then maybe I would think about it. But if they don't put a clutch on one, I would never buy another one again. I've seen enough with it. It's cool, but I wouldn't want one again unless there was a clutch. So, hey, thanks for listening to these podcasts. Again, if you want to support what we're doing here, go to my website, dirtbikechannel.com, and click on the link for Shop Rocky Mountain ATV. Then you just order as normal. After you click on that link, and it's also in the description of this podcast, and it's on the description of every YouTube video I've got. Just click on those links, and then you can order anything from Rocky Mountain ATV that you want. It doesn't have to be one of the things that I've talked about. It can be anything, whether it's tools or riding gear or oil or tires or anything. That will all come back to help Dirt Bike Channel. And Rocky Mountain ATV is the best in the business. So thank you so much for listening to these podcasts. And if you have any questions, you can reach me on my website. There's a contact form on the website, or you can just hit me up on email. It's kyle@dirtbikechannel.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. Until next time, leave it single track. Thanks.